T, how are ye? Welcome back to the Candlelit Tales podcast. I'm sitting down here with my brother Aaron.
I'm sitting down with Sister Sorika, and we're reflecting or chatting about the episodes we released recently. We used to call them Candlelit Tales
We
chats.
used to call them chats. We used to call them post-show chats because we used to do one chat after every story show, and then at a certain point that started to annoy me.
So, now
So I started giving them
chats
different
anymore.
names.
Although she's all about brand consistency and keeping
I
them
know,
solid.
but not that. That was never a good name for it. So we started calling them Reflections, and I'm very on the fence about it, guys. I'm extremely on the fence about Reflections. I don't know if it's a good title.
Like, holy or something.
Yeah, there's something a bit fucking worthy about
Is
it.
this still your intro?
No, I don't. Listen, hello everybody. We're talking about Samhain stories. It's also our busiest time of year.
But we're actually sitting down in a B&B in County Monaghan, where our mother is from.
Yes.
And we had a really interesting day telling stories. Did give them a workshop in a local primary school and going to the Patrick Kavanagh Centre, doing a show, and we're doing another one with Tredoodle Festival.
It'll be on again next year, and it's a very good festival. It's a lovely festival aimed at younger people and children and families in this area. They do a lot of workshops in schools.
And actually, we've been doing a lot of workshops and performances, mostly in schools as well, leading up to Samhain. It's always the busiest time of year, and it's kind of funny to be doing it. But so we're going to mention a couple of stories, I guess, we've been using live and for younger audiences. And we're going to have a chat about the last two episodes, the Crom Dove, and we'll have a lot to say about Crom Dove, actually.
And then you told about the
Avatar.
vampire.
The vampire, yeah.
The Avatar.
So
yeah, as I said before at the beginning of this intro, if you haven't listened to those, go back and listen to them. And that's our intro finished.
Jesus Christ. I was sitting here listening to you record the intro for one of the previous episodes. I was like, she's doing such a radio voice. She's doing such a radio voice. Like, you give me stick for my radio voice.
Yeah, I still maintain that your radio voice is morning DJ and my radio voice is midnight jazz.
Midnight, really? I'm not sure.
I'm like, hello everybody, it's jazz time.
I don't think you've listened to
We're
yourself.
going to listen to the story.
I don't think you've heard yourself. It's not what you sound like. You just put on a jazzier voice just there. Like, obviously. Hey everybody.
It's jazz time. Everybody sit back, relax and listen to a story. Which was also the contrast in our approaches to children's shows.
Oh yeah.
Because I like to hypnotise them until they're half asleep.
You do.
And then just kind of lull them and talk to them for a while, whereas you like to interject with some energy. And then they remember that they're children again and they want to get up and run around, and I'm like, oh, for fuck's sake. Oh, we all just sit down, lads.
It's kind of actually harder doing kids shows when there's two of you. It's nearly easier doing it as one person.
Yeah, you kind of just get onto your own vibe.
At this stage, it kind of is. It's also really nice to pass the book.
Oh, yeah.
And really nice to take a moment off. But it's when it is that improvised kind of, which story will you tell? Because it kind of nearly needs to stay alive with kids' stories. Because you're like, they offer up a couple of names, they might know something, and then you're like, okay, well let's go down that path. They might know Fionn, they might not. They might know Puka, they might not. They might know something about Crom Dove, or they might not.
It's nice to yes and them.
But I guess the problem with one particular Crom Dove telling of late is because
what happened? I haven't actually heard about this. You rang me beforehand to be like a Crom Dove and Crom Cruach the same person, and I was like, no, but also I know, but I don't
stayed
know.
Up so late reading stuff, and I was like, oh, what am I doing? And it was just, I kind of, every time I couldn't sleep, I was like, hey, what was that thing about I went down another wormhole. Anyway, I basically found enough information to kind of go, okay, so there's like almost 3 stories, and it's maybe even connected to Crom Dove, and a lot of people had said that. And then you had the story of Crom Dove and the doula.
Yeah.
And what that link was like, maybe I could tell that to a class, a third and fourth class.
Oh, they were fifth class? I think they were fifth class.
Sixth class. I think it was maybe fifth. Yeah, it was fifth and
I
sixth.
think they were your oldest ones, because you rang me and I was like, oh, they sound of a reasonable age.
They were. And I basically, I went into telling it with like, information laden stuff, which was kind of in Patrick, the Crom, who was the crooked one, who was potentially a massive serpent or monster or dragon or creature of the other world, was huge, and people would come and try and fight it and to try and kill it or die. He was a guardian of death, and also some form of link to the other world, and he was a god of fertility, and offerings were brought up to Patrick, potentially, again, version suspect, to give blessing on the harvest.
Because he's strongly, so the thing that I've been finding out, because I was reading the Festival of Lunasa, is that a lot of the old names for that festival, which is not called Lunasa anywhere in Ireland when it was still being celebrated, because it had kind of been folded into a church celebration, but it was called like Garland Sunday or Garlic Sunday, or there was a bunch of different names. One of the most common names throughout the whole country was Crom Dove's Sunday, and Crom Dove in that kind of version of the popular imagination was the last pagan chieftain to be put down by St. Patrick. So the festival was also very strongly associated with St. Patrick.
Yeah.
As are a lot of the hilltops that were previously associated with Lou, which is why Patrick was probably a Lou spot and is now a Patrick spot. But the name given to the pagan entity that he sort of supplanted is Crom Dove. But that's kind of, there's not a lot of story there. Like there's a story, the only kind of actual story that's there, and I'm only thinking of this now because I didn't think of it when you were on the phone to me, is the story of the chieftain offering a bull sacrifice in place of Patrick's sacrifice to kind of show him to one up him basically. And Patrick, I think, brings the bull back to life or something like that, or else the chieftain is somehow killed. I can't remember the details, and they also vary locally. But But again, there's a little bit of a bull sacrifice story, but again, there's just not a lot of there.
Yeah, so there's also a link to potentially a lord of known as Crom that was one of the last Celtic lords that was
pagan chieftains,
pagan chieftains. And after there, he kind of got demonized, and you can kind of peel back the layers apparently and look at this evil demon that kind of almost got worm illustrated. It was potentially based on a character or a lord who was chieftain pagan. Maybe not all that bad, but also paid sacrifice or homage to Crom, and that's maybe how I got the name. And then this deal that they had made with talisman. I'm going to say talisman. I think it's wrong.
That's wrong, because that's a word.
Talisman. I'm saying it so badly. I'm really sorry if you know this and it's annoying you.
Listen, everybody listening to this has already listened to that podcast.
Well, yeah, they know it.
Potentially 5 minutes ago.
Oh, damn it.
They could also go back and listen to it.
You idiots.
That guy, whose name both of us have decided we don't remember,
made a deal with Crom but a certain number of souls that would be given.
Oh, that's right.
Right?
Yes.
Thank God. So,
yes.
And then he doesn't give that number of souls, and that's where he gets the headless goddamn horseman to do that.
Yes.
So in the older version of that, it's a chieftain who brings his army to either the foothills of Patrick or the one in Kerry.
Karen Toole.
Yes.
One of the McGillicuddy Reeks.
Thank you. McGillicuddy, yeah.
Yeah.
And anyway, this army, a third of them died. Maybe it was slaughter, maybe it was first massive suicide.
Oh, this is the mass suicide story. Yeah.
Story.
See, that's dicey to tell children about.
So
you can't be
it was
telling
dicey.
children about mass suicide.
I did basically get to that point and went, what have I done?
Oh no.
Where am I ending this?
I'm running straight up on the mass suicide, and they're all looking at me with their big 11-year-old heads on them.
I was like, oh, there's some of them are 10. Oh no.
Oh no.
I was like, okay, and the dragon swooped down and they fought and it decimated the army. Yeah. So anyway, I managed to fumble my way through the end of that story with a lot of kids. As I kind of limped to the fact that he was maybe a Crom Dove. And did you know about the doodle? I hop, skipped and jumped out of that one.
And then there was a big army and there was a dragon and So there's this headless guy, right? Never mind. Don't ask questions about that.
That went down a treat, in fairness.
Good. Yeah, the Headless Horseman's a fun one. I very much was thinking about. We had a conversation with Kelly Fitzgerald, who's a professor of folklore in UCD, and we were talking about folk stories and the kind of making of them, and how they are so often kind of like local, and characters are like named, and it happens to a friend of a friend, and it's like, you know, we still do that. All of the stories you hear about, well, my friend, you know, something happened to them, like. And they're always quite reflective of whatever anxieties are going on in a population at a particular time. So, I decided to put a person in it. Because a lot of what you'll find about the Dualhan, like a lot of these folkloric monsters, is kind of a list of abilities.
Yeah, you do need to narrative.
You need to narrativize it, and that felt like a good way to. We moved chairs so that they wouldn't creak, and this chair just creaked
very loudly.
Anyway, I decided to narrativize him because it's quite terrifying. Because it's like the gold thing, but also being able to cross any threshold, being able to get through any door. Being able, unable to be thwarted.
I managed to successfully tell that one, but with a different ending to the one that you did with the kids. But they were actually younger. But they asked for the headless horseman. Like, I gave them an option of like, do you want to spooky
kids
one?
are bloodthirsty.
Yeah.
They want to hear about the headless horseman. Of course they do.
And so I was telling that, and I was like, how's it end again? I was like, I was just locked eyes with this like sweet little girl who's going, and she was kind of like really into the story, really listening, but also on an edge. Was like, oh God. And he lived happily ever after.
Don't make the small child cry. Not while she's looking at you.
No. There's always that line that you can cross with. Well, don't cross with live with kids with audiences that are like so wrapped and so hooked and so emotionally invested. Yeah. And that's kind of what I love about performing for kids, because you're taking them on this massive journey and they get so invested in it. When you're going to capture them. Now, I know
you get extremely invested?
My energy can often be like to almost build that up. No,
I just think we have different. Like, it's funny because this was like kids' performances are something that I didn't do for a long time, because I just
didn't like them.
Didn't particularly like them. Found them noisy and chaotic and less good. And have
gotten better at them though.
Yeah, like I have gotten better at them. We also booked several that you weren't available for, so I kind of had to get good at them. Because they're not a forgiving audience at all, because you really have to like do the thing. Mm-hmm. But I mean, stuff like I like that little bit of interaction with them and like talking to them. So like myself and Alan did a show out in Bray for the Mermaid Arts Centre, which was lovely. Mm-hmm. And like they were dialed in for over an hour.
Yeah, it's class.
Which is, I didn't think we could do that. Like 45 minutes is usually the upper attention.
Yeah.
But again, there was those kind of moments of like, okay, I'm going to tell you a scary story. It's just going to be too... You got someone to hold on to because it's going to be a little bit scary. And I told when I was telling them the Fionn and the dragon story, and I had one little girl who was like, yeah, scary, and I was like, are you sure now? And she was like, yeah. And then again, I saw her like clung onto one of her parents, and I was like, you promised you'd be okay? You're still good? And she was like, yeah. So, it is that sort of like little bit of interaction and that little bit of playing with. We couldn't really see them today in the performance because they were up in a gallery and they were kind of silhouetted against the windows and with stage lights. But I enjoyed telling them a bunch of true crow facts and then a story about a crow that was very made up.
I mean, it was actually super creepy. Like, it was such a good story. I was really sorry we didn't get it because today we were in the Patrick Kavanagh Centre in County Monaghan, which is absolutely beautiful. It's
lovely.
And they've these seats up in a U circle up above the stage, and it's quite a narrow. It's an old church. It's converted, and right in front of you they've couches. They can fill it up with kind of more seats, but just the schools were up above, and they're all in one place. But we couldn't see them, and they were above us looking down. But we could see them moving. We could see them raising their hands. We could see them if they turned. But by body language wise, they were hooked in.
Yeah.
And we got that nice bit of interaction with them. And then, I mean, it was great to have Queeveen playing with Alan again today, because Queeveen was just like playing the whistle, drifting off into magic la lovely land. And I was getting distracted with music being so nice, because I was like,
yeah.
Because you wanted to kind of lull into that little
Yeah.
soft little...
Well, that was what worked well in The Mermaid, so I was kind of like, listen, if we can lull them a little bit, I think that's a nice way of doing it.
It's really nice in theatres to be able to play with that. When the music is that beautiful and you're able to kind of dance with it, and the guys are just,
Just a nice little flowy thing.
Yeah, and in all theatres you kind of sit back a bit more and listen a bit more anyway, and kids just get that,
Yes. So I told a made up story. I made up a folk story.
But no, you told a very well crafted
Yeah.
rearranging of
Yeah.
a Merrow story, or the Selkie story.
The Merrow story.
The Merrow story, yeah.
Yeah.
And you did place it in Monaghan because it's landlocked.
Well, I placed it in Monaghan, which is meant landlocked, and then I decided to make it about crows, because one of my memories
Instead of seal.
from coming to Monaghan is the rooks gathering in the tree line, especially this time of year when the branches are a bit bare. Like, I just have a really strong memory of like crows and now there was a rookery near where our grandparents lived. Like there was a line of trees that was just like a crow city or a rook city, and they would get together at dusk and just like caw at each other. So I had quite a lot of fun telling the kids that, like, crows will recognize your face. If you throw a stone at them, they will remember you. They will tell each other about you. The same happens if you feed them, which was like, I had a lot of fun with that because I was like, I'm just telling them crow facts. Crow facts are really spooky.
I could see them looking at each other every now and again, and I was kind of like, this is a bit much, Soraka.
No,
this is a bit scary.
That's all true.
That's all true, isn't it?
So yeah, no, I was just telling you real things about crows. And then I just decided that instead of making it a mermaid or a selkie, that I would just make it a crow woman with a feather cloak, and pretty much keep everything else the same. I gave the guy, did you notice the name I gave him? The character in that, James Gunn. Do you know what James Gunn was?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Our great granddad.
Because it's from Monaghan. So I was like, I know that's a Monaghan name.
It's
genuinely a Monaghan name. So
great him.
I mean,
just told a story about our great granddad to.
Well, no, in fairness, it wasn't, because that's not how his marriage went. But
I know, but using him as a reference.
Yeah. Well, it was more the fact that, like, I know that there's guns in Monaghan.
Yeah.
If nothing else, there's some people related to that family in Monaghan. So that was also just a little thing that I was having fun with, which I think is a fun thing about folklore, is that you can find that line between reality and fiction, and you can kind of blur it a little bit. So let us talk about the vampire.
The vampire. Oh, you did a very good creepy voice.
Vampire.
Yeah.
I did. I got to do a creepy voice in a workshop, and I also got to do an extremely high pitched voice.
That was awesome.
That was great. Shout out to that one kid who came up with prophetic rhyme, a prophetic riddling rhyme on the spot. It was great. It was fantastic. We do workshops with children where we teach them how to make stories by basically giving them a series of prompts.
Yeah.
And then telling the story back to them that they made up.
Absolutely love it. Absolutely love it.
They adored it.
But this little kid had a linchpin of a plot point.
Well, one kid had a fantastic plot point, because what we were expounding on was the idea that you have to have a problem and you have to solve the problem in the story, but you can't make the solution too easy. Mm-hmm. So if the person who has the problem is friends with the person who knows the solution, there's got to be a reason that they haven't talked about it. And one kid was like, oh, it's because the one who knows the information only speaks in prophetic riddles. And we were like, that's fantastic. And then both of us were kind of going, we're not going to be able to do this. And then later in the same workshop, another kid was like, ask Brian. And he
was just like, his hand was up, he was just quiet.
Hand was up.
He was like, yeah, he knows. And then he just came in with a brilliant prophecy that rhymed.
4-line rhyming riddle.
Fourth class. Fourth class.
Yeah.
He was tiny.
Truly stellar stuff. They were mostly tiny. But now we are going away from County Monaghan. We are going to a place a few miles west of Garva, County Derry, in the area of Glenillan, and the townland of Slothaverty, stands a lone hawthorn in a field atop a hill. Aaron asked me to read this out from Folk and Flora. I heard this story earlier this year in August in Scotland from an Irish storyteller named Eamon.
Class.
He told it around the fire. That was a retreat in Scotland. We'll be running one again next year, actually, with Daniel from Lore and Legends and Kirsten and that whole gang. And it'll be, if it's half as good as it was this time, it'll be fucking brilliant. But yes, I had heard it there, which was the first time that I'd actually heard it told, because I'd read it and I was like, that is actually a cool story. We should do it. And then you did it.
Yeah. Luke of the Long Hand, who gave me, I gave me a lift home after a festival and back to Dublin, and he said to me before I get out of the car, do you know the one about Avertuck, the original vampire? You do, don't you? I was like, hang on, it rings a bell. I think Sorok mentioned it. What is it? Tell me again. And he sent me the link. And I was like, fuck, I didn't actually know it fully. So that's where that came in. I was only in like the end of September. I was like, we need this.
Here's what I like about it. Because vampires immediately became about Victorian sex repression with Bram Stoker's stuff. Because it was all about sneaking in young ladies' windows and penetrating them, but with teeth. It's all about sexual transgression. And that's why you get a direct line from that to like your sexy Twilight vampires. Like vampires are kind of sexy in popular culture, and that's because of that. Whereas I think Avertuck is, and we had the discussion as well about like the way that the kind of problematic way that deformity is treated in folklore as being indicative of one's moral character.
Because the description of him is essentially a small man, little person. He's a little person.
He's a little person, and he's like described as being sort of, that's like reflective of his mindset and his character.
And therefore, small people are bad. Watch out for me.
Yeah, it's that. Whoa, yeah. It's that fairy tale thing of like the ugly sisters are bad because they're ugly and they're ugly because they're bad, and Cinderella is good because she's pretty and she's pretty because she's good.
Yeah.
And you kind of like, you do get those kind of tropes come up in folktale and fairy tales. So, we kind of have to recognize and figure out a different way into the story. Because I think the way that we discussed doing it anyway was that if that's something that's in the character's head as being like, nobody wants me except for my power.
Yeah.
Then that's
and how to also, knowing you're not really in any way trying to, but wanting only the I guess the link in the arm, the clout, the look of having a wife and a queen, and the respect of having a married position that you're involved in, that rather than an actual relationship.
Yeah.
Nothing in the interpersonal, and being very bad at that, and like only being interested in the darker magics, the side of the dark, whatever it is that he's into. And all of a sudden that kind of jealousy that comes up from him out of nowhere, because he's like, oh, you, I don't know how people work. And I left the description of him being small out of it, or I didn't highlight it.
Which I like, again, from a modern perspective makes sense, because there is still a massive amount of prejudice against people with disabilities, and we don't want to feed it, while also not wanting to wildly uproot and change everything about the stories.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's interesting to me how like unsexy the Avertuck is, and how that link to threshold crossing and desire and forbidden desire isn't there in that version of the story, that is a later kind of,
and yet it's kind
thing
of
that Bram Stoker brought into. Not even Bram Stoker, you're talking about Varney the Vampire is the first time that vampires were like hot and desirable.
Sure.
Because again, it was representative of like forbidden sexual desire and.
Sure, and like, I guess there's a kind of, the story's pretty simple. He gets jealous of the wife, and then he dies and falls off. And each time he comes back, is he darker? Is he more evil? Like they're less and less happy to see him for sure.
Yeah.
And you have this demonic ruler who can't die popping up, and a guy trying to kill him each time he comes back. And like, I'm always kind of like, where did they not all run away? Why did they, like, what,
Yeah, and I think that's an interesting thing as well about like the idea of running away. Like, to where?
Yeah.
If your land is good, like, people put up with a lot of stuff back in the day. If the land was still productive, and that's where your herds were, and that's where your home where it was, and that's where your kin was, like, uprooting people is hard. So if a haunted vampire comes back, you're gonna try a lot of ways to deal with the situation before you run away.
Yeah.
And it turns out to be trees. He is defeated by trees.
Yeah. An old druid knows the way to kill him.
Which is also cool and interesting.
I think, it does kind of like lead that bit more support to think that if Bram Stoker had heard that story, he did link it in, because the idea of blood and blood sacrifice and not sacrifice, blood drinking to regain energy and kind of composure and strength. Strength.
This is definitely
there's the Far Marav, the Far Marav and the Fear Marav. So it was that, like, the dead people, the walkers, that that's just cool to know that like that's a thing.
Yeah, the hungry dead coming back is like a thing in folklore as well, of like the return of people who should be gone, and the kind of horror of that is definitely a big thing in Irish folklore. And I think there's something about, like, it's got to be one of those links that's intuitive, of like blood to strength, because when someone loses blood they get weak. So the inverse feels true, that by taking in or consuming blood you would get stronger. It makes a sort of a story sense anyway.
Yeah, for sure. And it's we're literally going into the dark half of the year. We're transitioning into that time of, and it is kind of listening to the shadow, listening to the stories of the darker side, listening to that. And there's a reason it's so abundant in our folklore and our mythology, and there's a reason you have to kind of entertain that imaginative realm a little bit. And it comes up for me certainly more in it comes up in the world more as it begins to get darker outside. And there's something kind of lovely about letting your imagination run wild with that, and that's why there's a whole genre known as horror. But I think with the folk tales, it's reassuring for me to know that these monsters have been made up in mankind's imagination for so long, and they've created and culminated in kind of a creation and a shape that's been added on by people in generations and tales, And it's kind of it's funny just to tap into this again and this again and this again, and there's not always a full story. There's not always a full tale.
There's a lot of fragments.
But the characters of folklore in the Irish store of Halloween and Samhain, they've stayed fairly strong, and they've been added to, and they've been multiplied, but they've grown legs and gone worldwide. The legends of the werewolves maybe come from Werewolves of Ossory, and that's a podcast. In fact, we do actually have all these stories on our podcast that you can go listen to.
Yes, Aaron did a playlist.
It's on YouTube.
And
we got a lovely message from somebody. I want to give her a shout out, because I did message earlier and said, remind me to thank this person.
Yes.
And we got a lovely message from this woman. Deal with Aaron Agus Sorg, Mila Malgood, for your amazing podcast. My partner and I have been travelling around Ireland from Canada since the beginning of August, and we've been listening to you and your entire journey. Your stories have been such a beautiful window into Irish mythology and culture. We particularly enjoyed the Invasion series, and of course your post-show chats. They're absolutely brilliant. McGraw, August, that was a beautiful message.
Yes, if that was your message, thank you very much for sending that message.
Good, Mila Malgood, and I guess we'll be talking to you again next time we talk about stories. Thanks so much, guys, and talk to you very soon. Bye.
Bye.